Good afternoon and welcome to Transition Talks Tuesdays. This is our fall 2025 edition. My name's Tim Markle. I'm director of the Wisconsin Youth Health Transition Initiative. And this series, we are looking at what does it mean, what supports are available to help students, youth with disabilities, autism, developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, move into adulthood. We know this time is super busy with changes in education, changes in employment, maybe changes in housing, changes in healthcare, so many changes, changes in who makes decisions that we have for 3 years. We've done a series about the different partners, and we reached out and we're talking to a couple different partners this year too, to try to learn how different systems help kids as well and students as well. But for a lot of the series of Transition Talks Tuesdays, I really try to have my friends and Danielle over at Family Voices kick off the series with a workshop that they do called What's After High School. This is a wonderful way to look at the overall setting as our kiddos are moving into adulthood. So I'm really excited to have my friend Danielle here and great partner in Family Voices of Wisconsin. And Danielle, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll be monitoring the chat. You will get a recording and you will get a research sheet and you will get a copy of the slides after we are done today. Just give me a few days. All right. Thank you, Danielle. It is all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. And hi, everyone, and welcome to What's After High School. So this is going to be, as Tim mentioned, that mile-high view of what you can look forward to and some things to think about when it comes to planning for the transition to adult life for youth with disabilities and special health care needs. My intention is to give you some awareness of what's to come and some things to think about and some real resources and leads about where you can go to learn more about any of the topics that I'll be covering. Um, I am certain, as Tim mentioned, I'm with Family Voices of Wisconsin, but I'm also mom to a young adult at home with special health care needs, and I share that with his permission. And frankly, I share that just to say that it wasn't that long ago that my family was going through transition planning ourselves. And you might hear me give a few examples about our experience with transition as we go along. And I have all of these faces that are now in front of my slide. So I'm just moving things around here a little bit. There we go. So before we get started, though, I wanted to share a little bit about Family Voices. We are the state affiliate of National Family Voices. We are a small nonprofit, but we have been around a while. This is actually our 30th year. All of us on staff are parents of kids with special health care needs. So when we say that we've been there and that we understand, we've been there and we understand. Our focus is on giving families the information that you need to make informed decisions about what's going to fit you and your circumstances and your family best. One of the ways that we do that is through learning sessions, just like this one, our email newsletters, and our online resource library, where you can find plain language fact sheets on a whole bunch of topics there. I think that last count we're at about 70. So I invite you to check that out. Another aspect of our work is around working with parents on skill building to engage in advocacy outside your front door, especially when it comes to being at those leadership tables for the programs and systems that support our families and our kids. Okay. Family Voices is part of the Title V network in Wisconsin, and here's a visual representation of some of those other agencies and groups that we're connected to. And I think one of the strengths of this network is that if we can't help or answer a family's question, we know of some others who do, including Mr. Markle here.
Well, that's kind of rude. I just gave myself a thumbs up, Danielle.
But as you should, as you should. Let's see here. Okay. So, Tim, this is where I'm going to ask you for one of those links, please. We're going to take just a moment here for a very quick poll so we can learn a bit more about you. Our work and presentations are covered by grants, including this one, and they've asked us to share back a bit about those we're presenting to. Please know that this is completely anonymous, but it helps us tremendously. So, if Tim can share that link. Thank you. We'll pause here for just a couple seconds. You can also get to this through the QR code there. And I'll continue on in just a moment.
And I know sometimes my computer does strange things to links and adds a certain level of defense to them. Not by my desire, but it just happens. So please let me know if the link in the poll does not work, and I will try to manipulate it.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to do that. So here's an overview of what we'll be talking about relating to that transition to adulthood. Well, the first thing we're going to be talking about is decision making, including how there are legal status changes that happen when our kids turn 18 and what that can look like. Then we'll be talking about long-term supports and healthcare, including private health insurance, public health insurance, and some of the programs that can support our kids as adults once they age out of some of those kids programs that they might be involved in now. Then we'll talk about what you can expect to change at school and around education, including vocational programs. And then we'll wrap up with a little bit about living and working in the community and what that might look like. I also wanted to share that we'll be packing a lot into this short period of time. So if anything that we're talking about is of interest, certainly I would imagine a lot of this will come up. You'll take a deeper dive into it in future Transition Talk Tuesdays, but also Tim will be sharing with all of you a resource guide and a copy of these slides after the presentation. So you can dig a little deeper into anything that you'd like to learn more about. Okay, so to get us started, transition or that transition to adulthood touches every part of our kid's life. Of course, it all begins with each individual child, keeping in mind, of course, that skills can develop continually from the day they're born and through the lifespan. Transition skills can begin when our kids are very young and they continue to develop and build way past the age of 18. So, we're going to talk about how transition to adulthood touches things at school, in healthcare settings, around public benefits, and, well, the community overall. And as we go through these materials, you'll see that some of these topics have specific ages when things need to happen, and some are topics and just things to consider over many years. Okay, so where do we get started, right, as families when it comes to this time? Well, your child's age does give an indication of where to start thinking and planning for some of these upcoming changes. To begin with, and again, this can happen at any age, talk with your child about their interests, both the things they are really into right now and things that they might want to try. And it's also a good time, of course, to talk about goals um, that they might have. And, admittedly, a reality can be that some of our kids might not how to answer or respond when it comes to goals or to really talk about or articulate what they're really into or what they might want to try. So we do want to offer, of course, for those who are non-speaking, Consider taking your nonverbal cues from them. What makes them laugh? What makes them smile? Do they seem to prefer to be with others? Do they prefer to be on their own? Do they do well with a light balance of both? Do they prefer quiet environments? Do they like being in spaces where it's busy? And all of these little clues will lead your whole team to help you think about what might be some good areas to begin exploring and thinking about when it comes to employment. So, the year that your child turns 14 is the time to formally add transition goals to the IEP at school. Keep in mind that you might need to ask and advocate for that skill development in social and community areas to be in the transition IEP. Know that if it's not there, it's totally appropriate for you to ask for it. And finally, here, try to identify a process where you're going to keep all of your notes, either written or electronic, because there's going to be a lot of planning and correspondence. So, keeping organized right out of the gate is going to help you save time and challenges potentially in looking for things later on. There's, of course, online tools like a Google Drive, or if you prefer paper, a binder with tabs, whatever method is going to work best for you. But I think the important message here is to just have one. So next, we're going to start talking about some important dates to have in mind. So, not all transition activities include dates where things need to happen, but some do. So, this is a quick run through of some of those key dates to remember. So, about 14 to 21 is when that formal IEP transition planning at school is going to start the year when our kids turn 14. Special education services can sometimes continue until the year our kids turn 21. And this is one of those times when where their birthday lands matters. So if your child turns 21 in October, well, then special education services can continue through the end of that school year. But if they turn 21 in those summer months, maybe July or August, well, then special education services may end right, that June before they turn 21. Really understanding and planning for when school will end is important to being able to plan for what's going to come next. At 17 and a half, you're going to want to connect with your county ADRC, or Aging and Disability Resource Center. Every county has one, and they provide great information on adult services in your community. They're going to connect you to determination offices to see if your child is eligible for different adult world services, maybe like Social Security or long-term support programs like Family Care or Iris. More on those in a moment. Some ADRCs, by the way, have transition specialists that will work with just youth in transition. That's all they do. I should also add that for families that are in CLTS, or the Children's Long-Term Support Program, your support and services coordinator might do what we call a warm handoff and bring the ADRC with them when they come for a regular CLTS visit to start the planning, start that transition to adult programs, and start that whole process. By the way, oftentimes CLTS will continue until our kids can make that pivot from kids programs to adult programs. For example, my son was able to continue utilizing CLTS until the year he was 19, when we were able to make that transition completely to that adult program. Okay, age 18. So in the US, people become legal adults the day they turn 18. So while you might have full parental authority the night before their 18th birthday, well, then they wake up the next morning, they are legally responsible for themselves. And there's multiple responsibilities that come along with that. It might seem a lot to look at this list, but there are many things that parents can do to help our soon to be adult kids be ready for this time. More on that in just a moment. All right. So let's take a dive into decision making and see what that looks like. And then, Tim, after each one of these chapters, I'm happy to pause so we can take on any questions that might have bubbled up.
Please feel free to put any questions that you might have in the chat, and I will keep track of those. And when we do pause, you are also free to unmute. Just remember that you will be recorded, so no personal identifiable health information, but I will keep an eye on people that unmute as well.
Great. Thank you. All right. So let's dive into decision making and what that can look like. Um, I mentioned earlier that parental rights end at age 18, and that's the time that your child becomes legally responsible, right, for their own choices and their own decisions. There are some adults, though, who might still need to have others assisting them in making decisions. And that overall concept is referred to as supported decision making. There are multiple tools that can be used to support our young adults. There are formal decision-making agreements, which looks like a document naming specific people, outlining the topics and the areas of their life where they'd like to have some help in making decisions. By the way, we do have a learning session that is just about formal supported decision making. And in addition to that, the Board for People with Developmental Disabilities has a great toolkit on their website too. So in case that's something of interest, which we'll talk more about supported decision making in a moment. But some of the other tools that exist include powers of attorney, guardianship, even a simple release of information form signed for at the doctor's office, at the bank, or at the school. Those are also helpful tools when it comes to decision making and supporting our new adults. A little bit more about supported decision making. Um, this allows the person to retain their rights to make decisions about their own life. But sometimes being able to make those decisions does take some practice. And many self advocate adults have told us that their parents were super supportive growing up, so supportive that as a child and even as a teen, well, their parents decided everything for them, from their schedule to what they wore that day. And then they turn 18 and they have to make these grown-up decisions for themselves without having had any practice. Frankly, my family lived this a bit. Right about age 16 or so, for our son, my husband and I started to be really intentional about not making all decisions for our son. We were there as a safety net, and we would talk him through the possible pros and cons of a decision, but we really started to be intentional about deferring more decisions to him around that age. Of course, starting younger than 16 is best, but just know that it's never too late to start. Okay, so let's talk about what informed decisions mean. Informed decisions does not mean the quality of a choice that our kids make, and it does not mean that it is the same decision that you or I or another parent or another caregiver would make. Frankly, I struggled with this a bit. My son makes decisions, but are they the same ones that I'd have made for him? No, but that doesn't mean his decisions are the wrong ones. Remember, making decisions is a learned skill. And if we want our kids to make decisions as adults, we need to give them the opportunities to practice deciding the little things. And that's for many reasons, but it's so that they can know that they can listen to their intuition or that gut feeling. Um, Informed decision making does mean that when they are deciding something, they understand the information that's needed to make a decision. They understand the possible outcomes of that decision, and they have a way of communicating that decision either verbally or non-verbally. I really like this graphic from the Board for People with Developmental Disabilities. That green arrow at the bottom. Decision making is a continuum. It's not an all or nothing arrangement. Looking at this, it helps to think about who will be the decider. When the person remains the decider, they can still access some help and supports through things like signing a release of information so that a parent or another trusted caregiver could call to schedule doctor appointments, for example. Formal supported decision-making agreements are an acknowledgement of where the person would like some help and make some support in making decisions. It's important to know, though, that those agreements do not relinquish their rights to make decisions, but it lets them access support resources and people to help them navigate the decision-making process. Again, with supported decision-making agreements, the person is ultimately still the decider. When someone else is the decider, that could look like power of attorney, or it could look like guardianship. Another layer of protection or support can be safeguards that are specific to financial circumstances. Like parents can be the payee on their Social Security checking account, or just simply having a joint checking account to provide support, or agreeing to something like having per transaction spending limits on credit cards or debit cards. Those can all be helpful tools. So we talked a little bit about guardianship, but I wanted to share a bit more about what guardianship is not. Here are some of the common myths around guardianship. Guardianship will keep my child safe. Well, that's a big one. And in fact, studies have shown that by having trusting relationships with others and practicing making decisions and learning consequences of decisions, that actually makes our kids safe. Guardianship is useful if I worry my child will make bad decisions. Generally speaking, guardianship is not awarded for this reason. For me, I worried all the time as we approached age 18 that my very sensitive son might be contacted by someone collecting donations for a worthy cause and he'd empty his bank account for them. He's highly compassionate, and I totally understand that fear. I had it too. But there are other tools like credit card transaction limits that can help with something like that. That's something that our family did. It allows him to make a donation to a worthy cause if he would like, without setting himself up to not be able to buy groceries 2 hours later. Okay, another one. Without guardianship, I can't come to IEP meetings. Oh, that's not true. The adult student can sign a release of information, and then you can still participate in those IEP meetings and have those important conversations to continue to support your now adult student. If someone under guardianship violates the law, they won't be charged and won't be held responsible. Guardianship does not give the green light to engage in illegal activities, of course. But this one is potentially a little bit true and potentially a little bit not. I think that my answer to this one is it depends. I've heard that there are cases where if something were to happen um, that those who make decisions about prosecuting can certainly take that under consideration. Um, so I guess this is one of those cases where it depends, but again, it doesn't necessarily insulate our kids under guardianship from being responsible. Guardianship can be changed later. Not really. They're actually really difficult to reverse. At, Once guardianship is established, the court has declared them incompetent. So you're going to have to prove that they are now competent, which can be a really high bar, and you'll need to explain that. I can tell the court how I want guardianship to be set up. That's also not true. Through the process, the court is going to identify an outside advocate to be brought in for your child, and they can say that the person that's seeking guardianship might not be the right one to have it for this young adult. And if that happens, the court's going to consider that very seriously. So that's important to know. As a guardian, I can make all decisions for my adult child. Nope, not really that either. You'd be making the consequential decisions, but not every decision. Part of the human condition is making some choices and decisions. So even when our adult kids are under guardianship, they'll still be deciding some things. Okay, so how do you know how to decide this? First, we really recommend that families start having conversations with their teen about their preferences when it comes to decision making. Chances are good they already have an opinion about this. We also really recommend that you talk with other families about the decisions that they've made when it comes to this. How did they decide, and what factors did they consider when deciding how to decide who the decider should be? Some families I've talked with felt that they made the right choice, and for others, they felt they didn't do enough. Some felt that maybe they went too far. And well, you can have the benefit of learning from their experiences, but I really want to encourage you to have conversations with multiple families about what um, what they took into consideration when it comes to this piece of things. Keep learning about all of the tools that are available. And of course, you're doing that right now by being here. And if you're unsure, we really recommend that families start with the least restrictive tools first. And keep in mind that guardianship or not, that's not something you have to do at age 18 or not at all. And in fact, today, judges do look at the tools and things that have been tried and attempted before awarding guardianship. Something you can do is ask your soon to be adult to sign a release of information at school and at the health clinic. That way, you can still be of help in those settings at the IEP meetings and at those health visits. And again, take your time with this. There really isn't a need to be hasty when it comes to it. Okay, before I continue on, I thought I'd pause here for a quick sip. Any questions, Tim?
So far, nothing but me filling up the chat with different links. So no
Fantastic.
questions at this point, but I'm probably hurting people's thumbs with trying to get them to find all the stuff. So I think we're good to continue.
Okay.
I'm looking for any unmuting, and I'm not seeing any there. So let's continue on. We also will hopefully have time at the end. So
Oh,
collect
yes.
your questions as well.
Great. Thank you. All right. So let's dive into long-term supports and healthcare. When it comes to paying for healthcare as an adult, there's private coverage options and there may be eligibility for public insurance. With private health insurance policies, there are a few aspects of it I really want you to be aware of. Under the Affordable Care Act, anyone can remain on their parents' plan up to age 26. It's also possible that they can purchase their own health plan through the healthcare marketplace, or they might have the option for coverage through an employment benefit. Or if they're going to college, it could be through a university health plan. So there are multiple sources out there when it comes to private health insurance. Also, for those of you where your soon to be adult kids are covered under your private health insurance plan, I want to encourage you to find out if your plan offers what's called a disabled dependent provision. This allows a child with a disability to stay on their parents' health plan for as long as the parents have that insurance. Now, not all private plans offer this, but many do. And so it's worth calling that 800 number on the back of your private health insurance card to ask about. And again, I recommend making that phone call in advance. That way you'll know going into it. In addition, there tends to be an application process and some paperwork to fill out if that is an option that might be available to you. Okay, public health insurance. Some possibilities there might include Medicaid, which can be accessed through Care Plus, SSI eligibility, and in long-term care programs. More on those coming up. They might be eligible for Medicare, by the way, for our young adults, or they might be eligible to buy into Medicaid by paying a premium. Covering Wisconsin, by the way, offers healthcare navigators that are great professionals to help you sort out what might be the best fit for your family on any of these. Okay, long-term support programs. So for many of you, your child might be currently utilizing CLTS or the Children's Long-Term Support Program. Well, that ends once they become adults. They may transition to one of two adult, well, actually three long-term support programs. There's Family Care Partnership, and IRIS. Family care operates a lot like a managed care health plan where they coordinate everything for the young adult, or IRIS, in which case the person is essentially provided a budget and then they decide how to use that budget. They decide the areas of their life where they would like to use those resources for support. And the Family Care Partnership is a program that is essentially I guess I would describe it simply as a mixing of those two things. And that is something that is fairly exclusive to the Southeast region-ish of the state. Um, so there are multiple areas of support that are focused on the intended outcome or goal for the person. They do this, all of these adult long-term care programs do require an application process, which is usually done by your ADRC. And again, sometimes your CLTS support and service coordinator might bring with them someone from the ADRC to talk about those adult support programs. And again, eligibility for those adult long-term support programs is also based on a functional screening process. In CLTS, you're probably used to going through that functional screen each year. Just know that the functional screen for adult long-term programs is different than the one for the kids programs. So I know it probably feels like we as mom, I get it. We go through a lot of screening, right? And regrettably, this will be one more. But it's needed to access some really important supports. Okay. Healthcare. Healthcare providers are going to change for our kids. For example, we might see a pediatrician or a children's dentist, or maybe a professional that specializes in something like pediatric neurology. Now, some of these kids, specialists and healthcare providers might be able to continue seeing your adult child, but others might not. So consider asking at your next appointment so you're not caught off guard, and you can plan for those roles to change to an adult provider before you learn that that's needed. I also wanted to share that if you learn that they are willing to keep seeing your adult, keep in mind that sometimes that can change too as policies or staff change. That happened to us. Frankly, our son was going to a children's dental practice. They had shared that they would be happy to keep seeing our young adult, but the ownership of the practice changed. And when that ownership changed, their practice around seeing adults also changed. Um, so again, even if that children's professional shares with you, yes, we'll keep seeing your young adult or your adult, keep in mind that that can still change. So just to have that on the radar. Hospitals. So those of you that might frequent a children's hospital, well, children's hospitals and adult hospitals are really different environments. So it might be worth dropping into that adult hospital for lunch a few times. Explore the building if you can, probably more than once. This is also a good time to start thinking about portable records, having an emergency plan. A medical summary that travels well, maybe a medic alert bracelet. They make some now that are this really comfortable, squishy bracelet. My son wears one that has his name, his date of birth, my phone number, his dad's phone number, just in case he finds himself needing help and isn't able to speak. Okay, we talked earlier about the importance of practicing decision making as a learned skill. Well, that's really important when it comes to healthcare. And there are things that we as parents can do to increase our kids' independence in these healthcare settings. Have conversations with them about things like how would you describe yourself or your health condition to somebody you just met? Um, you could also do things like have them start practicing, refilling their prescriptions. And that's something too you can do one step at a time. Maybe start by having them go with you to pick up at the pharmacy and having them give their name and information at the counter. Then maybe start having them use the scan refill tool in the pharmacy app, those kinds of things. Practice how to communicate what they need, either to you or a caregiver. And that might involve figuring out what tools they need to do that successfully and trying out a couple of different ones. When it comes to building independence around this, our family had success with this when we would let our son know ahead of time what we were looking for him to do. That, for example, that we wanted him to check himself in at the clinic front desk. On the car ride over, we would role play what to say and what they might ask. And we told him that we would be there to help him if he got stuck or if he had questions, that we would answer his questions, but not theirs. And we would stand right beside him at that check in desk. Then the next time we need to check in for the next appointment, maybe we would be a half a step back. And the next time we'd be a few steps further back yet. So that's just an example of how what that building independent skills looks like for our family. Okay. Questions about healthcare before we move on to school.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Looking for unmutes, nothing, but I did throw in, just so you know, Danielle,
Please.
we are having 2 sessions with Covering Wisconsin on healthcare insurance because we know families have talked to us about the fact that they're not really sure how to talk about health insurance to their young adults. And so we wanted to try to lay out a basics of health insurance with Covering Wisconsin. So that'll be
Great.
coming up next week in person and then online in October. And we will be talking healthcare transition with the future Transition Talks Tuesdays on October the 14th. So come on back.
Yay. Fantastic. All right. So let's talk about education settings. So here's a little about what you can expect to see at school. So transition planning as part of that IEP process starts at 14 with a PTP or a post-secondary transition plan. And remember, when our kids turn 18, even if they're still in high school, the rights of the person still moves from the parents to the person. So you might want to ask your adult student to sign that release of information at school so you can still support them in those settings. And in that PTP document, the team should really start thinking and talking about life after high school, including how our young adults can continue to have a sense of community even after their years at school are finished. You're also going to want to keep an eye to the type of courses that they take as they work toward either a diploma or a certificate of completion. Transition programs can have kids continue in high school beyond age 18 up to the year when they turn 21. If your kids go this route, they can still participate in graduation ceremonies with their peers. Just that folio they get after crossing the stage might have something else in it. If they get a diploma, Generally, their time at school is complete and they don't usually go on to stay in school to age 21. So when you start hearing conversations in those IEP meetings come up around graduation or diplomas, really lean into that and clarify what does that mean? Because again, in some, and this varies a bit by school districts, but in many cases, when our students receive a diploma, that is the end of their time at school. So when you hear those, diploma, graduation, ask some clarifying questions so everyone is on the same page. For those that do go on to those transition programs, here's a list of some of the things that our kids can do. They might take a college course or do some job shadowing, do some volunteering, and of course, practice those all important life skills in getting out in the community, learning about things like navigating public transportation, for example. Okay, but what about homeschoolers or those in private schools? Well, if your youth is at these transition ages and they don't have an IEP, there are some things that need to be initiated by the family because the school isn't going to be doing that for you. Again, start working on skills to build independence. It's also true that families will need to proactively call the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation if you'd like to use those services or supports. More on that agency in just a second. But usually the school makes that connection for you. But if you're homeschooling, you're going to need to call the DVR office and get your kiddo plugged into those resources. You'll also going to want to find ways to maintain those social networks, including clubs, so that those connections continue even once homeschooling is all done. Okay, I mentioned earlier about DVR, or the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. And they usually get involved starting around age 16 or when our kids have about 2 years left of high school. By the way, DVR counselors can participate in IEP meetings. It's actually a great way for them to get to know our kids. DVR pays for supports for many things, including the things on this list. They don't usually provide the service themselves, but they pay local agencies or organizations to do these things. For my son, DVR paid for some job trials, some internships, so he could have some job experiences to find out what kinds of things he liked and liked less. They paid for his transportation to work. They paid for a job coach, which was someone to support him in his role at work or in these internships. And eventually, by the way, those services were all provided by his long-term support program, but DVR got him started and continued to pay for these things until the long-term support program could start picking those things up. Okay, so what if they're going to college? Well, I think the big thing here is to recognize that self-advocacy skills being developed before college are really important because a lot of the laws that dictate IEP regulations and stuff at school, like IDEA, those don't apply to college. In college, the student really needs to seek out the supports that they need. Support will not necessarily come to them. They need to seek it out and ask for it and be comfortable in doing that advocacy to do that. Okay. Question. We're in the home stretch here, guys. Any questions about school?
Oh, give me a minute. I'm busy trying to find resources.
Ah,
Um, let's see. I am not seeing anything in the chat, and it looks like everybody seems to be tracking well. So let's continue
great.
on to community.
Sounds good. Okay. So there are all kinds of options and considerations when it comes to working in the community. So integrated employment, or what I guess I would describe it as traditional employment, the way most of us think about it, this can be a position they apply for and interview for, even with supports through that process. And supported employment, meaning they might have support at work. My son had a job coach that helped him stay focused on tasks and helped him figure out next steps when he got done with something. So, those are the kinds of things that are available through integrated employment. So, segregated employment is something that still exists, but frankly, many advocates are working to eliminate these environments. They are circumstances where employers are able to compensate workers with disabilities at less than minimum wage. But again, they still exist. I think the segregated employment is something that was developed, I think it goes back to the 50s or maybe even before then, before all of these other support programs were available. So, self-employment. This is something that's becoming more and more popular and is something that DVR resources can help support, by the way, whether it's being a YouTuber for a living or a lawyer and a school board member. Self-employment is becoming more and more common. And if that's a route that your son or daughter would like to go, just know that there are supports out there for them to pursue it. Day services. That's where they offer a wraparound program where the person might spend part of their day working and part of their day doing other things, usually recreationally, and it's sort of all contained in the same building. And by the way, any of these job situations can be full or part-time. They can be combined or mixed and matched. So some of the supports that are available when in that integrated employment setting, we talked about earlier what's available through DVR or those long-term care programs. There are vocational agencies that do things like job developing. They might make that initial contact with a potential employer. They can help with securing any adaptive equipment that might be needed to be successful at work. Well, and more. Okay. So this can be a tough one, right? Where are they going to live? Well, I think it's important to remember that this is a super individual decision. It's a family decision. And even then, well, any decision around this can be temporary, right? Staying at home now can still mean that they might seek their own place in the future. And moving out today might mean they'll be coming back home tomorrow. When you start thinking about this, the ADRC can help, your Iris or family care teams can help, and the independent living centers are a great resource, and there are many others. You're also going to want to, frankly, talk with your soon to be adult about what they're thinking they want. And if they tell you that they plan to move out on their own, I really want to encourage families to support that as best as they can by making sure that our soon to be adult kids have the tools that they're going to need to be successful in making that change. So here are some of the housing and residential options that are available to adults with disabilities and special health care needs. There's a variety of different levels of support. It can look like someone that comes to their home a few times each day, or maybe they prefer more support in a more regulated setting. Just know that both exist and both are possibilities. Part of our role in communities is voting, and that includes for our adult kids. If you go through the guardianship process, your child does have the opportunity to keep their voting rights. Unless a person's voting rights are specifically removed in the guardianship process, by default understands the objective of the electoral process,
Excuse me,
which essentially,
Danielle?
Yes.
we just had a little internet freeze there. So if you could just back it up by about a minute and re-say what you said.
Oh, I
Thank you.
sure can. I'm sorry about that, guys. Am I back, Tim?
You are back and you're I think got into voting rights unless they've been removed. So understand the elective process.
Gotcha. Thank you. The standard or the guidelines that are used to help um, someone determine about this is whether or not our kids understand the objective of the electoral process, meaning that they're capable of understanding that, the purpose is to vote for someone so that that person wins, so that person wins the job, right? Also, I wanted to mention that if the individual has lost the right to vote, they can ask to have that right restored through a petition to the court. So just know that that's possible. Another important thing about adulthood is how much the sense of community around our kids is going to change. They used to go to school every day, but maybe now they aren't. Maybe they're used to a busy home life with parents and siblings all coming and going, but now they're living on their own, and that's not the case. So, certainly keeping up with friendships and social connections is actually very important. Encourage them to keep looking for things to do for fun, volunteering, stretching themselves to keep trying new things. I know this has been a lot to think about. Just know that everything can't and should not be done at once, but consider what you want to deal with first and then go from there. Who's going to help you with this process? And what do you need? And what information do you need? Before we close, this is a short evaluation form. It lets us know what you thought about this session and also lets our funders know what you thought as well. Well, and Tim, if I can kindly ask you to share that link in the chat, that would be helpful. And that can also be accessed through that QR code.
It is in the chat.
Great, thank you.
And this is an ideal time. Also, we do have some time if anybody has any questions to get those into the chat, and I can then let Danielle know what they are, or after she's done with the closing here, or well, right now, feel free to unmute yourself, and we can take some questions here. And again, remember we're being recorded, so please no personal identifiable health information, and if you don't want your picture shown, please turn off your camera. Any questions?
I would just like to add that I hope this has been helpful. The intention was to sort of provide that preview of things to think about when it comes to planning for this time. Um, and I wanted to mention as well for any of the professionals that are joining us, Family Voices is always looking for audiences to present learning sessions, including this one too. So if you feel like this was helpful and you'd like us to share it with other families, just know that we welcome that. And our contact information will be in the materials that Tim will be sharing.
Yes, so we did have that. Yes, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question about the transition planning in the IEP. Um, does does what you put in the transition plan for an IEP, are those things that you only would work on after age 18, or are some of those things that you could be working on before age 18 through school staff or other resources? Does that make sense?
It does. That's a great question, Jim. My understanding and full disclosure, our son was homeschooled, middle school to conclusion. My understanding is that that yes is the short answer. That those
Danielle,
things.
can I jump in?
Please, Tim,
Okay,
please.
so yes, so Jim, starting at 14, the school team should meet and as they build that post-secondary transition plans, the post-secondary transition plan should be the steps that will be taken during high school to help the child reach their goal upon exiting. So they set the goals, but there should be coursework, there should be community involvement. There should be connecting with DVR. There should be connecting with the AD. All those can happen within the high school environment, including setting goals for healthcare and improving healthcare can also be part of the post-secondary transition plan, as well as other independent living goals. So then those are worked on, hopefully well, they're worked on at school, but also hopefully then also with the family and with the youth. So it's really meant to be a very holistic way of looking at where do you want to be and how can we help you get there for after high school. So definitely they should be working on those goals within the school setting starting at age 14.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. And feel free. I love the way that Jim waved to get my attention. That was perfect. Thank you all so much for being here. Thanks to the people in the chat, I will now work double diligently to get the recording posted and we'll get an information. We'll get that sent to you about when it's all ready. Danielle, thank you so very much. I love starting off Transition Talks Tuesdays with What's After High School. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye all.